So I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar about the next step in field intelligence gathering. And it's going to be our pleasure to show you how radically you can improve your field gathering capabilities. My name is Christian Bjersér. I'm the CEO of Comintelli Inc. That is the North American operations of Comintelli. And today we're going to take you through this exciting new feature of our software intelligence today, the Field Intelligence Retriever, or FIRE for short. And with me today, I have my colleague Jeff Mansfield. Jeff, would you like to make an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed a typo there, but I'm Jeff Mansfield. I'm the Director of Customer Success at Comintelli Inc. I head up customer operations and sales support.
Yeah, that was a little bit of you did used to work at...
I did used to work, yeah. I spent 20 years at Proactive Worldwide, so at the end of the day...
that's kind of a subtle way that you're getting all of your experience in there, being like a 20 years plus expert on CI. Nice one. Well, thank you, Jeff. Before we just hit this off, I'd like to draw your attention to that you'll be able to ask questions during the webinar. Type them in that little Q&A box that you have, and we'll going to try to answer them. However, we're going to be respectful of time. So if we're not able to answer your question during this webinar, we will definitely reach out to you with an answer afterwards. So about 1.5 years ago, one of our clients came to us with a question. Now, this particular client is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And the question was simple actually as it was challenging. Can you help us become more effective in gathering intelligence from the field? Because this is a serious issue for us. So what we did was that we put together a cross-functional team with our client and had Jeff head it. Basically, you guys got to work. So Jeff, can you walk us through these challenges that the client had and elaborate a bit about the needs of the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. The needs, the challenges certainly were not unique. I think the client kind of felt like it was, but just in the experience that I've had over the years, field intelligence gathering, conference monitoring is a variety of ways that you can identify it. Comes with some very typical challenges that organizations need to overcome. And in this case, in the pharma industry, it was particularly difficult due to the voluminous nature of how much content they need to collect at these pharma conferences. It ends up being, in most cases, thousands of photos on potentially hundreds of meetings. These are extremely large events. But regardless of if it's a huge conference for pharmaceuticals or a small or medium-sized conference or even just field intelligence gathering in general, there's a variety of different things that commonly organizations face. I think some of the largest are the long days that most conferences create, whether it's you're hiring vendors or you're doing it yourself. End up being very long days that require some type of report at the end of the day, a flash report, a summary. Sometimes that happens every morning early for the conference itself. You've got a whole bunch of content you get out of these events, but no ability to search it. So the use of it disappears relatively quickly. Of course, the value of it maintains itself over time, but human nature kicks in and no one wants to go back and look at photos from 6 months ago, 3 months ago that could contain valuable insight. That inability to search is a real challenge. And just the volume of it. You do get hundreds of photos. I've done probably over 200 conferences in my career. And what it ends up being is a lot of photos, a lot of content, and what that ultimately translates into, and what the client ultimately, was looking for us to provide, was really 3 key things that expands into a whole bunch of solutions. And that's the ability to automate the collection process, the ability for staff to get content from a trade show to decision makers. And then the second big piece was searchability. We want the ability to know what's in a photo, know what's in the content, be able to go back and look at it. And what we're looking for today to solve a question or an answer to solve a question may be one search, but 6 months from now I may get a new question that I may have the answer to already, but it's in these photos and I'm not going to go through these photos. So that searchability element is really key. And I think another third really big part was this ability to provide instant access. Historically, organizations store this in file folders. It could be on SharePoint. We're all familiar with SharePoint. It looks really glossy on the front end, but on the back end, it ends up being a bit of a challenge to manage unless you want to invest $1 million and hire a bunch of consultants, which most companies don't do. So the idea is this, I know where it is. I can find it. I can index it, and most importantly, I can get access to it essentially anywhere I am. I think those really led to the solution that we're going to sort of outline here today.
So that's a pretty long list of obstacles, and I would say a serious wish list on the right side there. Could you, but just to give us some perspective here, could you walk us through how this type of collection is done without the support of FHIR? So let's start there. Let's start with where are we when we don't have this kind of support?
Sure, and obviously it changes based upon the organization, but these are fairly regular types of events. There may be a block or two missing from the middle for a client organization, but for the most part, it's all the same. So in this instance on the left, if you've never been to a pharma conference, and I bring up pharma just because there's a high degree of complexity there. They have two different types of photo environments that they typically go after. The first one are these scientific abstracts, these what they call posters, that have a wealth of information on it. And that photo right there is actually one that I took at Proactive when we were doing conference monitoring. So it's not like, it's filled with information. It's a little, shrank a bit to put it on the presentation here, but it's not exactly the best photo you've ever seen. It's a little bit crinkly. They did a pretty poor job putting it up there. And then the second one, which is common, is you've got presentations that take place where you've got presenters that come up and talk about what they're doing, what they've learned, any number of different facets. And these exist at any trade show. It could be photos of marketing literature and sort of the slick sheets that organizations put out. It's presentations during conferences that exist. Every conference I've been to, it's always a large volume of photos and a large volume of meetings. That's the whole point, and the treasure trove that conferences have. But in the middle here's all the stuff you got to deal with, throughout. You've got a daily brief development. You've got you got to create some type of structure that both you and your team understand, as well as the end user. There's some type of document or summary creation that comes together. What that is sort of at the end of the event. There's some type of, here's what we learned, here's what was uncovered, but you have to take notes along the entire way. And sometimes those notes are associated with a photo. Sometimes those notes are associated with an event like a meeting. And then you've got this arduous process of sending all the content that takes any number of time. You typically have to do it through FTP. So now you're talking more steps, more challenges. And I think the worst part is, when I kind of wrote this slide, it was on the far right there. The outcome is a handful of summaries and hundreds of photos. And in intelligence space, that's not intelligence. The summaries can be, but what it ends up being is a mountain of data. And as we all know, intelligence is found in photo 6 or presentation 25. It's not a mountain of file folders and files within those folders. So it ends up being that it goes against what intelligence gathering really is. Yes, the intelligence is in the summaries, but the ability to go back and understand or glean more doesn't exist.
So if you're looking at big conference, you mentioned the pharmaceuticals like ASCO. I mean, we're looking at participant numbers up to like I think it's 42,000 were on the last the conference that was virtual this year, or electronics. I think CES tops like 180,000 participants. Yep. That's just an enormous amount of participants, exhibitors, and a massive amount of data, of course, coming out of that. Mm-hmm. So what can you, I mean, this is what we have today. So what can you actually do then to make this process more effective? Because looking at this, I'd say this is a high cost exercise. Having you, like you said, you have been on 200 conferences with your teams, taking photos and doing these things. So, I mean, these are not sort of small numbers when we are talking to budget, on a budget perspective. So what can we do then to make this process more effective?
Yeah, and this is a normal problem, right? And I think this is what sort of generated the idea behind FIRE, which we call intelligent OCR, IOCR. And what we've been able to do. So OCR is a relatively well-known technology, right? It's optical character recognition. It's how machines read content off of images and other elements. But the catch here is that OCR isn't good enough for what competitive intelligence professionals need. It just simply isn't. The ability to pull it off a piece of paper, pull it onto essentially a piece of paper, is effective, but we want the intelligence that comes out of it. So what we designed here at Comintelli is the ability to take visual content, apply OCR, and then essentially apply the intelligence to it. So we can pull content out of a photo with 99.5% accuracy. That photo we were showing earlier, we can index 100% of that photo. We actually use it for our demos of the FIRE tool. And once we have the text, once the machine has the text, we put that through intelligence today. And once we have that in there, there's a whole bunch of things that it provides us the ability. Intelligence today is incredibly powerful competitive intelligence software. And it allows us to categorize it, organize it. It automates the alerting process. Essentially, it helps not only read the information, but tell you what's in it. And then once it knows what's in it, it can execute certain actions associated with that. So it can let people know who need to know. It automatically knows, how to organize it and, where it should show up. And most importantly, it gives you the ability to go back and look at it, historically. And all of a sudden you've got intelligent OCR running because you've got essentially AI-driven activities taking place on OCR content. FIRE, which we haven't really talked about the definition, is essentially field intelligence retriever, right? The idea here is that it's pulling together the content from the field and turning it into intelligence. And it takes a tremendous degree of effort for people to do this, but from a machine, it's nearly instantaneous. It takes a moment to load, and all of a sudden it is done doing what you need it to do.
So Jeff, because I think this is very interesting. So if I understand you correctly, it's not so much the process of making images readable, but actually understanding what the content of the image is all about. Right?
Exactly. You can get OCR in several different places, but there's no value to the OCR if you can't do anything with it. It just turns on being more data. That's not what you want. You want intelligence, and that's where you need AI, you need machine learning, you need a whole bunch of tools that you can turn into that intelligence feed that you're looking for, and not even you, but your end users are looking for.
Right. All right, Jeff. So I think that's pretty clear. I just want to share a quote from the chat right now. One of our participants saying that you understand my pain. So I think you're onto something here with your project and Fire, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all right. So what we did here was we talked about the process before. That's the pain process, as we understand. We talked about the idea of the solution. So can you take us back to the process again, and let us see what kind of impact Fire has on that process?
Yeah, absolutely. And this slide was a lot easier to build because it just there's one step in the middle. And when we were putting this together, it's one of those things where it's like, it really is that simple. The photo process you still have to take. The machine needs content to work with, so you still take the photos. But one of the key steps that changes is instead of going through a lot of the process orientation that takes place in order to get it to a deliverable format at the end, it is as simple as just uploading it into the system. So you go through an upload process. There's a variety of different ways that can be done. We'll talk about it through just the interface of the machine. You upload the content, whether it's a single photo like a marketing slick, or in this case an abstract or a poster, or a series of photos from a presentation. And we've all been there. If you've been in competitive intelligence and you've sat through these, it's a photo for every slide. It's a photo for the high value slides. Either way, it's more than 2 photos. Most are 30. And the idea is you put those photos into the tool, and then it produces content on the back end. And what happens in that process is it's tagging, storing, organizing, and then sending, if it's set up that way, right? If you want it to send content to other users within the tool. The effort of summaries takes place when you're uploading the content. That means it's short, it's fast, it's to the point. Obviously, you could still produce a final report if that's needed, but no longer do you need to sift through the photos to do that. You've got a system where you can quickly look at them, and the best part is that when you actually upload those presentations where you got 30 photos that are associated with the same presentation, it actually turns your photos into a PDF. So there's no more gluing into PowerPoint or anything along those lines, or trying to create a PDF. It will do it for you. It organizes it for you. It ends up being an incredibly powerful tool that really revolutionizes the time spent processing, organizing, and disseminating content from trade shows.
So let's say then we talked about kind of from the process perspective of the intelligence staff and the intelligence operatives on the ground, but let's say that, just to get it clear, let's say I'm a decision maker in a pharmaceutical company, and that means I'm in charge of millions of dollars in research budgets. I would be highly interested in what my competitors are presenting in my field. So it's essentially, instead of having to wait maybe weeks for a report to be compiled after an event, I would actually be notified instantly as the system recognizes what the relevant information is that has been captured by the field operative, right?
Yeah, and I'd go so far as saying is the moment it's uploaded. It's not even when the system recognizes, right? It's literally the moment it's uploaded and you hit publish or you hit send essentially in the system, they're notified. It's that fast. It's instantaneous. As long as your process aligns to publishing it in the system and providing people access, which the clients that are running Fire currently do. They've changed the way that they've organized their sending to they've got 30 or 40 product managers that are relying on this data, and they're always knocking on the door saying, where is it? Where is it? They upload, it's done. They have it, and they've got the content, and they can work with it. In many cases, what they end up doing is they go into the content and actually copy elements out of photos and put that in presentations internally. This would be what end users are using it for.
Right.
It's instantaneous.
Right. So I can understand why this has caused quite a bit of commotion in the organizations that you've worked with. And it's great to see. But and this application area is huge in itself, but I know you've been using it slightly differently as well. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's not just conferences. It's the easiest place to do, right? It's the most obvious, but there's a whole bunch of places and how you can use fire and intelligence today to monitor conferences. The first two, you got photos and field notes from the presentations themselves. And that's the other thing to know, right? As intelligence professionals, whether we're using vendors or we're there ourselves, there's always copious amounts of notes. The idea is uploading those notes into intelligence today versus scribbling them on a piece of paper. So literally in a meeting, you could be typing the notes and hit publish along with photos taken at the event, and bang, you're done. You can also take copies or upload electronic files that have been handed out. We'll get into virtual stuff in a moment. But then also, because it's not just photos, it's also text analysis and everything else. Features inherent in intelligence today. It's sitting in social areas and listening and putting down notes as rumors. You could tag them as rumors, and they can be treated differently within the system. You can take interview notes from the conference floor, pictures of marketing content, essentially anything. The value of the tool is basically allowing users, as in our users of competitive intelligence, the people we provide content for, kind of going to the conference and seeing what we learn instantaneously without having to go. So it's not just trade shows either. This can be applied in any different type of format, whether it's some type of corporate meetings that exist, whether you're at supplier conferences where you run into competitors. It's essentially anywhere intelligence is gathered outside and sort of in person. Think of it that way in terms of where some of the strongest applications of fire can be.
So there's obvious, I can see, there's obvious versatility here. But another thing, the past year, we've seen how conferences have changed due to the pandemic. Some are postponing, some are going virtual. And even if we probably see on-site conferences coming back, virtual is a factor for the CI community to consider, I would say. So how do we deal with that? I know that Fire has been tested on a number of virtual conferences in the past year. Could you share some experience on that as well?
Yeah, and we started developing Fire 2 years ago, right? And we had a good run. We had a good run before COVID, and hopefully we don't have to say that word much longer, but certainly before COVID. We were nervous as well, right? It's like, well, this was designed for field intelligence on the ground. What happens when everything goes virtual? And what we've learned, what clients have learned as well, with no changes to the software tool or the capability, the need for it has actually increased. And there's three reasons why. The first being is that the volume of content has completely increased. It used to be that you had to send people to go take a photo or sit in a meeting. Once it went virtual, it meant that you could download as many meetings as you wanted, as much content as you wanted. So the content load actually increased. In some cases, it switched over to PDF and PowerPoint. Great thing is intelligence today inherently can read those types of documents to begin with. So easy to absorb. It's all in the same package. The second part is that there's still tons of photos through screenshots. And what ends up happening there is the system can work with, whether it's taken on a smartphone or on a screenshot, it can work with images. So it made it very easy for users to take screenshots and then drop them into the Fire solution and have it do its magic. And then the third thing that was really interesting was this idea of remote. And everyone was able to connect to the networks remotely. But what it really enhanced the ability to do is, hey, I've got slow connections. I can't easily add stuff into the file servers of the organization. I can't allow, even though photos are safe, I can't upload those into the VPN because of the nature of security. Fire helped deal with all of that because it's a cloud-based solution. So ultimately you had people needing access both to the content that was created and the ability to upload it and actually solve that with no problems whatsoever.
Right. So I want to get back to something we talked about a little bit earlier, and that's getting the rapid insights. I know there's been talk about this in the intelligence community quite a lot, and I think it's such an important question. So could you just illustrate, show us something, how this real-time sharing, as opposed to the old ways of doing things, work?
Sure. So the traditional approach is you got to review notes, look at screenshots, rename stuff, write a brief, more time needed for longer events, right? So on the left is a far more complex document. The brief report on the left would be a traditional intelligence report, even coming out of intelligence today, the way that we used to do conference monitoring, right? And the idea here is that it's voluminous, and this is what creates the gap of time between when intelligence or data is released by a creator, content provider, presentation, and then getting it to end users. The dramatic change is you create an upload, you add your quick analysis. This is what's to interpret from these slides, this slide, and then you hit send, and that's it. Essentially, it changes it more into, I'll call, alerts and sort of action briefs than dissertations that take place during the day. On the flip side, users can create environments where they can see what comes in for the entire conference on a given day. They can also focus it on their areas that they only care about, and that's the real key. Is because the system knows who it goes to or what's in it. It basically helps align the content to the people who need to know specific elements of intelligence. So it's a dramatic change as to how you create. There's still some summary, some final reports that you generate at the end. And the key here to solving that is you can put references to links in the system so they can actually download the files that involve it. And it ends up being, you focus more of your time on the final conclusions than the process to get there. And that's where we want all intelligence activity taking place. It's the implications. We want to spend as much time on thinking and implications versus the process of collection and analysis.
And of course, as a sort of an end user's perspective or recipient of intelligence, I would probably much rather have a quick alert on what I'm really interested in instead of having to sit through hundreds of pages of debrief reports and trying to find what I'm
well, and you even want the deck. Great, hey, thanks intelligence provider, I want to read the whole story. Sure, right? Exactly. And bang, here you go, versus a little piece, depending on the customer. But there's a lot of requests that I used to get at Proactive all the time where, hey, can you send me the whole deck?
Yeah.
All of the photos. And the answer was, sure, here comes 40 photos in a PowerPoint presentation, right?
So, Jeff, you've been involved not only in the development process, but also hands-on at conferences, testing it. You have massive experience in the field. Could you give me a summary of what you think are the most important benefits of FHIR?
Sure. I think when you look at this, you've got 5 real keys. You've got 1, reducing the amount of time. And again, time is important because it's a cost element, and it's also time that we can take away from other more important activities in trade show events and field collection. Either way, it's reducing the number of hours of uploading and content control. I think that's a huge first step in terms of ROI on tools like FHIR and just conference monitoring in general. The second element that takes place is an increase in communication. Instead of having delays of time and even questions that come back after the fact, one of the cool things that you can do with FHIR and intelligence today is the idea that when users get content live or near instantaneous when you upload, they can actually send questions back. They can ask, hey, can you ask this question? And all of a sudden you've taken a conference monitoring event into a much more dynamic environment that produces better value because people who aren't there can actually be there with you. I think it allows you to rethink how you use resources remotely. It can decrease the number of people going to conferences, both at the vendor level and or your own organization. If you embrace the technology, you can use it in a very effective way to control costs. Proactive, it's tens of thousands of dollars for conference monitoring. And then you've got the ability to do self-serve CI. It's one of the things that we're always pushing in the intelligence space is I want to answer big questions from the executives. When there's random questions from topic areas that are not as important, I'd love to send you someplace to look. With Fire, you could search full text, any image that's uploaded, any presentation that's uploaded. It's incredibly powerful from that perspective. And then ultimately, it allows you to reduce resources. All of this essentially pays for itself. When we ran some calculations on the cost of Fire and how much organizations are spending on trade shows, we should be charging more. We don't, but at the end of the day, it is a cost saver at the fundamental level. So one of the things we also joke about is, yes, it has all of these benefits, but at the end of the day, it pays for itself in resource reduction.
Okay, excellent. I think that we're approaching our time limit here, but I think we can spend a few minutes on questions. So I have a couple of them that's come in, and a couple of them actually talks about setup. So I have two there that can probably be combined in one answer. How long does the setup take? And can you tell us just more about it?
Yeah, the setup is actually fairly easy. We want a few topics that help orient the content. So we want to know a little bit about the content that you're planning to process with the tool. It doesn't have to be specific. For example, for the pharmaceutical organizations that have this, we tend to want to know what conferences they go to. So we can put some basic topics into the tool that allow it to reference conferences by name or by logo or any other facet there. That's literally how long it takes to set it up. We create a few dashboards and a few alerts for users. These are all things that can be done by users, but we create that space and then we're off to the races. It's actually very fast. It uses all the powers and capabilities of intelligence today. It's search engine, it's indexing, processing, and so forth. All we need to give it is just a little bit of direction as to what it's receiving, and we're good to go. We could set up a system in less than a day. And
then we get some technical things here. Do you work with any type of image?
Yeah, the best images that work with, and this is related to the image quality and just how OCR works. JPEGs and PNG files, which are the predominant file types when it comes to images, are what we want to process most of. Bitmaps and stuff like that don't always have the resolution, and OCR doesn't always read it as well. Although we have had some success with it, we believe that the JPEGs and PNG files are the safest files to use. That's where you get the 99.5%, is probably even higher in terms of capture from images.
Yeah, and I've seen some pretty blurry pictures that were actually that the system actually was able to read. So it's kind of an impressive capability there, and that's the AI part of the IOCR that comes into play as well on that end. And the final question here, and then we'll reach out to all the other ones that we have, but. I think this is kind of a good one as well. Old photos. What if I'm sitting on a sort of treasure chest of old material from previous conferences that someone really should do something with? That
was sort of the huge envelope that took place. A lot of when we developed the tool for the single pharma client, and we now have a handful of them. It always starts with the problem at hand, which is the conference I've got to go to in 2 months, right, or in the next 30 days. All of a sudden, once we get done with those conferences, there's this light bulb that goes off and says, oh, wait, we've got years of photos that we want to process. And the answer is, let's get them in. We need to create just a simple bridge process to make it easier to upload. We can do that through a variety of different technologies. Or users can upload, but we can do it faster behind the scenes. But the idea is that Uploading previous content is as simple as we've talked about. It doesn't need a file name. You can read the content and put it where it belongs. So even if you have photo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get them in there. Most clients, from their experience, are only taking the last 2 years. They recognize that, especially in the age that we're in, going back further doesn't have as much value. But it's a simple process. Typically, because of the number of files, we do it overnight, and there we go. It's super simple, and it really increases the value of your stock, so to speak, and really makes it a powerful capability. It's almost like having a little like patent, system inside your organization with tends to be technical documents available through search. Incredibly powerful.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, everyone. It's been great presenting to you. The questions we didn't have time to answer, we'll get back to you. And if you want to reach out and discuss more, or even if you want to see a live demo of FHIR, reach out to me or Jeff, and we'll set it up for you. We'll leave our contact information up here for a while, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian.